Welcome back. 412-575-2600 on the Borders and Borders hotline. Give me a call. Want to talk to you. Also got a couple tweets to answer here on Twitter. Before we get to tweets, before we get to phone calls, I want to tell a little bit of story. I did an interview with a radio show. Longtime friend of mine, Tom Barton, does radio out in New York. Basically, he looks at it from the gambling and the Vegas handicappers perspective. And a couple questions that he asked me about how I felt about the Steelers for the upcoming season, and a couple of numbers. One of them was an over-under of 8.5 wins for the Steelers this upcoming season. And I'm sitting there going, you got to take the over with that. I see this team as probably a double-digit win team. And that's not even probably. I see them as a double-digit win team. 8.5 just feels so strange. It feels way too low. I was also given a number of touchdowns by Najee Harris, also 8.5. I'm thinking double-digit touchdowns for Najee Harris. I'm thinking probably at least 12 or 13. These are numbers that were really surprising to me. So it looks like from the outside, from the view that is not in Pittsburgh, the expectations for this team coming up this season are not very high. Then we hear some different analysts talking about it. You have one analyst that's saying Ben Roethlisberger, he expects him to be benched midseason because he won't be playing well, which I think is kind of crazy. Because if anything else I'm looking at this season is going to be different with his offense. Yes, I know the offensive line is, for the most part, different, give or take one or two guys. Of course, Zach Banner's back in at right tackle. Kevin Dotson's going to be at left guard, but also Chooks Okorafor moves over to left tackle. But then you got new guys at guard and at right guard, Trey Turner at center, whether it's Kendrick Green or B.J. Finney. Granted, B.J. Finney's an old guy who came back, but you get my point. With the offensive line being different, I still feel like this offense can be better for two reasons. One, Najee Harris is going to be able to cover a lot of faults on that offensive line. There's something about Najee Harris that I really, really like about his game. You very seldom see him brought down in the backfield. When that happens, normally when running backs get brought down in the backfield, it's because something went wrong on the offensive line. But even when things go wrong for him, he still finds a way to turn negative runs into either zero gains or maybe even positive yardage. And that's not an easy trait to have. That's something I see that could be better. Plus, there isn't much he can't do running the football. He can also catch passes, which makes him a really, really good candidate to be the prime running back in this offense, provided he stays healthy. That's always the thing with running backs. The other thing I look at, this is Matt Canada's offense now. I've felt this way since last fall. You don't bring in Matt Canada to just be a position coach. You bring him in because obviously he has some things that he can help you with, and he did that in the earlier part of the season, but also because you think he can be a part of this offense moving forward, and now this is his offense. And I have to remind people, this is a guy who had Pitt's offense scoring 40 points a game 5 years ago. Sounds like a miracle in and of itself, but that's how good the guy is. And if we're talking about the effect on both the run game and the passing game, I think those two things alone make this offense look a lot better. So that 8.5 wins predicted for the Steelers, that over-under, feels really, really shallow for me. We'll start out on Twitter, actually. We got a question from Jason on Twitter. He says, JT Brubaker looks to be regressing to where he was just a month or two ago. He hasn't been impressed with Oscar Marine as the Pirates pitching coach. And JT Brubaker, when he first got that opportunity with this team a couple months ago, he felt like a guy that with the way he was pitching could be somebody that sticks around long term. There were a lot of things that looked good with him. Today, it just didn't seem to click. I think it's just the fact that he ran into too many barrels way too often and didn't help the bullpen came in. They're walking a bunch of guys and made it look 10 times worse. But when you look at the fact that he struck out 7 batters and then gave up 2 home runs and 6 runs in 5 innings, it's too many of the combination. I should say it's a combination of too many of the wrong things all at the same time, and it all just came to a head in that game. And by the way, the Mets scored 10 runs in the 6th inning. If you want to know how badly things went, that explains it a lot. Let's go to the phone lines. We got Mike on the north side. Mike, you're on the Nightly Sports Call.
Hey, thanks for having me, Josh.
Thanks for calling, Mike.
Hey, bear with me now on this. I don't think we should trade Adam Frazier for several reasons. One is we have one of the best 1-2-3 punches, certainly the best in our division. Second of all, Key Brian Hayes will develop much better with having 2 all-stars surround him in the batting order. Third of all, when you build a team, you build it up the middle. The Pirates' goal this year was to find a core that they could move forward with. When you build a team, you build it up the middle. If you look up the middle, I think Newman with his 99.9% fielding percentage and 206 batting average is fine in the 8-hole. Stallings is fine in the 7th hole, especially with the young pitching staff. And then you look at center field and Frazier. I mean, this is a strong core that we could win with the addition of one more player. What we're really missing is 4, 5, and 6, and I know that's big money positions in the batting order. And that said, I think we should draft Jack Leiter. Again, this will make us. Our pitching staff has done well this year through the first 5, 6 innings, but we always have 0 or 1 runs on the board when that happens. And I think Leiter will be a quick fix as far as being up in the big leagues within a year or two. I want to know what you think.
You laid out a lot of things, Mike. That was actually a pretty good call, and thanks for doing that. That was a really great call. I think you kind of answered your own question because you laid out a couple good points as to why they should keep Adam Frazier. However, you mentioned being built well up the middle. The problem with that theory, Adam Frazier is 29, Jacob Stallings is 31. When you're building long-term, you don't want your second baseman and your catcher to be on that side of 30. That's what makes it a problem, especially when you're trying to build through the middle. The 4 places you don't want guys being on the wrong side of 30 is up the middle. And right now, Brian Reynolds and Kevin Newman are the only 2 guys that are probably on the right end of that spectrum. 29-year-old second baseman after 30, they drop off a cliff. History tells us that. Catchers after 31, 32, they drop off a cliff. History tells us that. And that's nothing against them as players. But if we're talking about building long-term means 2 to 3 years, which means in 2 to 3 years, Adam Frazier's 31, 32 years old. Jacob Stallings is 34, 35 years old. Do you want that kind of group being the anchor of your team? Or do you want it to be a little bit younger to where you're looking at guys like maybe Nick Gonzalez when he steps in as a second baseman, be a lot younger? That'll be something that makes more sense. Or maybe having a younger catcher, which kind of brings Henry Davis back into the discussion. Because the way you feel about Jack Leiter, who could be a guy who comes up quickly, I feel the same way about Henry Davis. That's how I feel. A guy who has a really good bat. If he gets his footwork down and learns the final points of the position, he can be a guy that makes a quick run too. It's just a matter of how you build that nucleus. And your points were solid, but it also points to another problem. We can have all these things in place in the infield, but they need so much pitching. Pitching is so much of a depth issue that Jack Leiter alone can't fix that problem. Ben Cherington's probably going to use a lot of picks probably in those first 10 rounds, looking at high school pitchers and maybe a college pitcher or 2, because that's a depth issue they need to look at as well. There's quite a few things going wrong as far as how the depth looks in this organization across the board. That's why you've seen so many problems as far as the pitching goes, starters that can't last through games, bullpens that can't hold leads, and then more importantly, outfielders that can't produce because the options are just so limited. So there's a lot of things that while you can fix them, there's some other things that still get in the way. We got to go to our tweet of the night, brought to you by Tri-State Office Furniture. This one comes from Andrew Filipponi, 93.7 The Fan, friend of the show. He says, excellent Pirates insider Jason Mackey from the Post-Gazette on 93.7 The Fan, giving us what he thinks are the top 3 players on the Pirates draft board. Number 1, Marcelo Meyer. We talked about him, the high school shortstop from California. Number 2, Louisville catcher Henry Davis, whom I can't seem to shake that feeling. And number 3, Jordan Lawler, the shortstop from high school out of Texas. No Jack Leiter, which I find interesting. We will take a break. We'll try to answer another couple phone calls, maybe a tweet or 2, and we'll talk about that, maybe some other stuff. Stick around.